Okay. Well, good morning. Thanks so much for being here, everybody. I wanted to get everybody here today to provide an outline of the arrangements and some of the unique aspects of this year's census, which is due to take place on Tuesday the 10th of August. And with just a few weeks to go until census night, we thought it was an opportune time to talk about how it will be a bit different. I'm joined by the Australian statistician, David Gruen. Him and his team at the Australian Bureau of Statistics, I must say, have done a phenomenal job in preparing for this year's census. But before I do so, I want to reflect on the enormous value of the census, the enormous value that's provided by our men and women who work for the ABS, and indeed the expanding team that the ABS will be over the next few weeks. As most Australians know, and as what we will try and emphasise in our advertising campaign, the census data underpins a whole manner of government decisions relating to major policy and expenditure areas from infrastructure, health, education and transport. It's used extensively for electoral boundaries, federal government grant allocations and, of course, GST distribution. It plays a critical role in improving Australia's economic and social infrastructure. It informs so many of our decisions, and in the advertising campaign, which will commence on the 4th of July, we'll be seeking to emphasise and reinforce with Australians who I think implicitly understand that the answers that they provide in the census will make a huge difference. The numbers at a glance: this is a huge undertaking. The ABS undertakes this massive logistical exercise, and this year is no different. It takes 7 years from planning through to the release of the data to conduct a census. And to give Australians an idea about how big it is, here are some facts. Recruitment activities are currently underway with 38,000 temporary jobs required across Australia. The largest cohort of those 38,000 is 20,000 field officers within local areas, and this is a crucial workforce which will help participation in the 2021 census. The ABS will be sending out 15 million letters over a 5-week period in August and September, and over 10 million households will be contacted by the ABS either by mail or in person by field officers. Information about the census will also be available in up to 29 languages. So on any measure, a massive logistical undertaking which David Gruen, Australia's statistician, will speak a bit more about. So what's changed? When we think back to the 2016 census to the 2021 census, I think it's useful to just outline some of the changes. In relation to security, the ABS has built a completely new census digital service for this year's census. Testing and assurance activities have been ongoing and have been under close oversight by the government, with a focus on performance and obviously security. The ABS, and I want to congratulate David and his team, has worked closely with the Australian Cyber Security Centre, the Department of Defence and the Digital Transformation Agency to ensure state-of-the-art cyber security protections are put in place. We're also undertaking rigorous testing, including something that I learnt about not too long ago from you, David, ethical hacks of our IT systems and a simulated distributed denial of service attack to ensure our systems are robust and are in the best shape possible for some of the issues that have occurred in the past. Building on a range of monitoring tools to provide real-time alerts on issues, that's been conducted through that work as well, and conducting independent security assessments of our census systems through the Australian Signals Directorate IRAP program, and the assessors are endorsed by AST. As I said, the Digital Transformation Agency has also in their work with the ABS, confirmed that the Census digital service is compliant with the digital service standards for Australian government services. I also want to emphasise that all information collected in the census will be securely hosted in Australia and encrypted end-to-end to ensure that our data sovereignty is respected. A couple of other things that have changed since the last census. New topics. We've now got 2 new topics in relation to health and veterans. The question on long-term health conditions, which is new in this year's census, will present a list of conditions such as heart disease, arthritis and diabetes, from which Australians can select one or many. The government will also be more equipped with a comprehensive understanding of our veteran community by asking a question on service in our military. Another change on the process of the census, which again David Gruen may wish to expand upon, is the extended time frame that Australians will have to complete their census. Census night is the 10th of August, but people don't have to wait until census night. If they know who will be home reasonably on the 10th of August, they can start their census form as soon as they receive their instructions, and those instructions will be sent to Australians 7 to 10 days prior to census night. This extended time frame is primarily designed with convenience in mind. People who have busy lives who want to complete that census as soon as they get it, while it's in their mind, are encouraged to do so, again, if they're of a view that they reasonably know who is going to be home on the 10th of August. As I said in my opening remarks, an advertising campaign will begin on Sunday, July 4. This will include ads on TV, radio, newspapers, outdoor advertising, and of course digital and social media channels. It'll obviously help raise awareness about the census, and as I said at the beginning, it will also emphasise what I think is well understood amongst Australians, but just how important their data is and how important that as many Australians as possible complete the census. The wonderful thing about the data we collect in the census in Australia historically has been the very high rates of completion that we have, and the ABS goes to great lengths to ensure we get that participation up as high as possible, and that's a big part of what this advertising campaign will be about. So the census, it's really fundamental to helping us plan as a country. It's critically important that everyone completes it, as I said, and as I keep emphasising. The ABS is doing everything it can, and I can assure Australians it's doing everything that they can to deliver a very successful and seamless 2021 census. And I might ask David Gruen, Australia's statistician, to add a bit more detail.
Thanks, Minister, and thanks for coming to the press conference. The census gives Australians a detailed picture of their communities and also of the nation. The census provides enormous value to the country. In particular, the census provides information at a local level that often can't be found elsewhere. This information is relied upon by governments and also by lots of different organisations. Let me give 2 examples of organisations that use census data. First, the Wheat Belt Business Network in Western Australia's southwest provides support to businesses through advisory services, mentoring and networking. Through census data, they identified that women in business are one of the fastest growing entrepreneurial demographics in the region. As a consequence, the Wheat Belt Business Network developed a business mentoring service which connects female business owners in the region with high-profile and respected business leaders. The second example comes to mind because I spent last night sleeping rough up at the National Arboretum. So the second example is about Orange Sky, which provides free laundry facilities, showers and conversation to the homeless. The census provides the most reliable information on homelessness, and Orange Sky uses census data to determine where their services are most needed. These 2 examples and many more case studies you can find on the Census website that gives you a sense of the range of organisations that use census data and what they use it for. Let me now turn to a timeline and the significant milestones ahead. And I'll also describe how people can participate in the census and what success will look like. The 2021 Census advertising campaign, as the Minister said, will start on Sunday the 4th of July, and our Census phone service will open the next day to assist the public with queries. On the 28th of July, the Census online form will open. Households across the country will start to receive instruction letters by mail in early August. These letters will include a unique login ID and instructions about how to complete the form online, or, if people would prefer, how to order a paper form. For those who wish to complete the form online, they'll be able to do it securely on a computer, on a tablet, or on their phone. We're planning for around 75% of forms to be done online, which is, it was 63% in 2016. Paper forms will be delivered to households in areas where completing online is less likely to be preferred or possible. For example, possibly because the internet connection's poor. As the Minister said, people can complete their census as soon as they receive their letter if they know where they'll be on census night. And as the Minister also said, we'll have more than 20,000 field officers working across the country to help people complete their census, including reminding them that their census is due. An innovation from last time, there will be census information hubs that will be available in up to 400 locations across the country, providing a face-to-face way for the public to find out more about the census or to get a paper form. And there will be fill-in-the-form sessions and information sessions in a range of community settings. Special processes are in place to count groups such as people experiencing homelessness and those in institutions such as hospitals and hotels. We will provide support for people who are deaf or find it hard to hear, blind or with low vision, including resources in Aslan and the ability to order braille and large print forms. We're employing over 2,000 community field officers to specifically support Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities, culturally and linguistically diverse communities and the homeless. Census advertising will be translated into 19 Indigenous languages to help Indigenous communities to be counted. Census information for people from multicultural background will be available in up to 19 languages. I was puzzled when I read up to 19 languages. I wondered why it was up to 19 languages. And the answer is that radio ads will be in up to 29 languages. Radio ads will be in 29 languages, but other forms of communication will not be 29 languages, they'll be less. And there's in-language support through telephone interpreter services. For those living in remote Indigenous communities, the census is conducted over an extended period between July and August. That's so that remote teams can get to the remote communities and visit multiple communities rather than doing everything right round the 10th of August. Census staff will visit remote communities during July and August to help people complete the census through face-to-face interviews. If for whatever reason we can't get access to a community, our census engagement managers will continue to work with the community to understand their issues and to allay concerns. All attempts will be made for census staff to be recruited from within the communities or the surrounding regions. For this year's census, we've got the added complication of needing to be ready to respond to possible interruptions because of COVID. And of course, the safety of citizens and census staff are of critical importance. We've undertaken extensive planning on how to engage with the community and how we protect our staff in the event of a COVID outbreak. And our planning includes quarantine facilities. We will ensure both incoming travellers from a declared hotspot and international arrivals staying in a government, state or territory quarantine facility have the opportunity to complete the census. Last year's October census test involved 100,000 households in select locations across Australia. Our COVID safe plan was tested in different states in this test. In Victoria, we used a mail-only approach with no field staff, relying on letters and advertising because Victoria was locked down. In Sydney, we tested a contactless approach where field officers dropped material at the letterbox instead of knocking on doors. And in South Australia, we tested how we would withdraw our field staff in response to a sudden change in restrictions in that state and organised the safe return of field staff once restrictions were lessened. So we don't know exactly what will happen, but we have tested the various possibilities and we think we're as well organised as we can be with respect to COVID. While the census test was small, it was 100,000 households, not 10 million, we were glad to be able to test our systems and our work and health and safety processes ahead of the census. The responsiveness of our COVID-safe plan continues to be tested as we have adapted our field operations, most recently in Victoria, in response to the recent lockdown. What will success look like? We have a range of metrics to judge success. We're aiming for an overall response rate of 95%, which, as the Minister said, is very high by the standards of other countries. Success hinges on the timely delivery of census instructions across Australia about how to complete and on providing a seamless and trouble-free experience for those who complete the form online. The accuracy of counts of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people needs to be maintained. We had a significant undercount in 2016. That's a group that's particularly hard to enumerate. And insofar as possible, we want to improve our enumeration, the proportion of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders that we enumerate. This includes a particular focus on the response rate in the Northern Territory, which of the states and territories has the lowest historical response rate. We will also pursue high quality outputs, including robust information from the new questions that the Minister talked about. Looking beyond the collection phase, data from the census will be released in 3 phases: June and October of 2022 and in March of 2023. The census will provide further insights into the impact of COVID-19 across the Australian population. We need everyone to be counted to tell the story of how Australia has changed and to plan for the future. As always, the census will provide invaluable information, including at the local level, that governments, businesses, communities and individuals can trust to make important decisions. The ABS is working hard to ensure that we deliver a safe, secure and efficient 2021 census, and I thank everyone in Australia in advance for their participation. The census provides critical information to plan for the future. It's important that everyone completes. Thank you.
Well done. Thank you, David. Thanks for being here, everyone. I think we're happy to take questions.
Dr. Gruen, this is the first census, I think, that will coincide with the Olympic Games. You've got, our Olympic team will actually have left because the competition starts on the 23rd of July before they can be counted and won't get back in. Are we going to undercount our sporting stars and support staff in this year's census?
Well, that's a good question. That's a good question. We count people who are in Australia, so I think we could get back to you in some detail, but perhaps not at the press conference.
They'll actually be in quarantine back in Australia
on
census night.
Okay.
Census night.
Oh, well, there you are.
If they're not celebrating something.
So we will look at it.
Provided they're here in quarantine, they'll be counted.
Dr. Gruen, in terms of the closed borders, does that have any material implications on what we might end up seeing in the census data results? And is there an opportunity to sort of cut out the noise from other countries and tourists? Is that how you're viewing it?
I'm not viewing closing the borders in any way other than focused on counting the people who are here. To the extent that there are people who would otherwise be here but are not, we won't count them.
Just with regards to, you mentioned there that the people who are in quarantine, whether that's hotels or places like Hazelwood Springs, so a bit more detail as to how you go about making sure that they are going to be included. Is it just a case of dropping forms at the hotel and them getting delivered as they're getting their daily meals, or?
So one of the interesting things that other countries have discovered conducting censuses through COVID is that the proportion of people who fill in online goes up. And that is what we suspect. We think that may happen here. I mean, we're obviously not in a situation of COVID is very much under control, but we will do what is safe. So clearly, in a situation of quarantine, we have to be extremely careful and make sure that we're not in contact with people who are in quarantine. But we have ways of communicating with them, and we will use the ways that we have developed for the circumstances in which people are under quarantine because there are lockdowns. So we'll use those mechanisms to be in touch with people, and we'll encourage them to fill the forms in. And perhaps they don't have a lot of other things to do, so they've got some time.
I apologise this is in the pack, but will those conditions that you were listing include mental health conditions, and will they sort of be aligned with the veteran data?
Yeah, so they will include mental health conditions. It's quite an exhaustive
It's a long
list actually. So, we're very much hoping that people will exhaustively go through it. And I think of the two new questions there, in some respects, we'll try to achieve similar objectives. But those long-term health consequences, I don't know if you've got the full list there, David, but
I do.
It's quite a long list, and it does include mental health.
Yeah. I can read you the list if you're interested. Got to find it. Here we are. Okay. Arthritis, asthma, cancer including remission, dementia including Alzheimer's, diabetes excluding gestational diabetes, heart disease, kidney disease, lung condition including COPD or emphysema, mental health condition including depression or anxiety, stroke, any other long-term health condition. So it's a long list.
The last 6 months, we've seen a fair increase in ransomware attacks and denial of service attacks. This censuses are a very high-priced target. Has that gone into the government's thinking? And Dr. Gruen, given what happened in 2016, how confident are you about this one?
Yeah, look, it's been probably one of the biggest sources of conversation between myself and Dr. Gruen, and I think we're very pleased that the ABS has really invested and incorporated the agencies that I spoke about, whether it's ASD or the Cyber Security Centre, from the commencement. And I suppose there's always a caveat that you don't know what you don't know, but we feel about as prepared as you can. And when you think about things like distributed denial of service attacks, we have conducted, I think, some of the most thorough tests in relation to that. The ethical hacks, which I spoke about, getting together some of, well, I think we'd consider, David, some of the best minds in the country to really test our thinking, test the systems, test the census. So it's something that will be at the front of our minds until the census is done, and you can never call mission accomplished on this, but I think we've invested more than probably anyone could have imagined in security. I don't know if you want to add, David.
So all I wanted to add was, look, never say never, but because it's not possible to completely eliminate the risks of cyber attacks, as is clear from experience. But obviously everybody who's working on the census is acutely aware of what happened in 2016, and there were a large number of reports written in the aftermath of 2016, and a total of 29 recommendations for what the ABS should do to make sure that we didn't have a repeat, and we have implemented every single one of those recommendations. And we have had the Australian Cyber Security Centre working with us pretty much from the get-go, and in a range of ways, including ethical hacking, looking at our systems from the inside, as the Minister said, we're as prepared as we think we can be, but I will sleep more soundly on the 12th of August after this is over.
It's ethical hacking.
Yes.
what does that specifically mean?
So ethical hacking. There are
I'm not the only one that had to ask that question.
So, who knew the new occupations in the world? So it turns out that there are companies that specialise in hacking, in doing their best to hack your system. I mean, with permission. You ring them up. Well, I'm sure you don't ring them up. I'm sure you email them. But you say to them, do your worst, and tell us what you find.
Are they an occupation listing in the census?
Not yet. Nor in ANSCO, but we will need to update ANSCO to include ethical hackers. And I suspect there's only a fairly small number of them. I think it's a pretty niche occupation. And I suspect they're pretty young and they wear turtlenecks. That would be my guess.
What were the main concerns around security? Was it state-based actors, or what was sort of getting there?
So the answer is that we have to be prepared for everything, including kids in their parents' basement who would think it would be a great idea if they could get into the system. That state actors, people who, as is clear, the ABS holds a lot of sensitive data. We do it as carefully as we possibly can so that we protect people's privacy, but it is something that means that you have to have as sophisticated protections as you possibly can.
And whilst not a security issue, it's more a systems-based issue. Having more of an emphasis on people completing the forms, or at least encouraging them in some aspects, completing their forms as soon as they get it, mean that load on the system will be spread over time. So I think people of my generation and older have always thought about a census night. And while that's very important for integrity of data, and we still encourage people only fill it out if you know where you're going to be on that night, I think the practical reality is an experience in other jurisdictions has been practically, even in the old days, people would fill out the form where they got it in many instances. So this is a recognition of that, and if we spread the load over a period of time, of course the 10th of August will be the biggest load, but if we spread that out, that helps from just a system stability perspective too.
Dr. Gruen, you were saying that you're hoping for a 95% return rate. Are you worried, though, that any of the reputational damage that might flow through from 2016 could dissuade people from actually getting involved and sharing their data this time around?
So interestingly, we had a 95% response rate in 2016. And it's more that there's a general gradual reduction in response rates all around the world. People are less willing gradually to do these things, and so it requires a substantial amount of effort I mean, the majority of people just do it, but getting the response rate up from 75% to 95% takes a lot of effort and over several weeks, and we go back and back and back to people who haven't filled the form in, either electronically or on paper, to try and convince people of the importance of doing it. So I'm not worried about 2016. It's more that it's just an effort, and the benefit of having as high a response rate as possible is that the information's much more accurate. And you want granular information. You want information at the local level. And so to the extent that you can convince 19 out of 20 people or 19 out of 20 households or more to fill it in, the quality information's better.
David, it might be worth emphasising too that people can complete it after the census.
Yes,
You just want to outline that
I
too.
mean, we encourage people to complete in the window, but it's not. And that's what we're encouraging, but it's not too late. If you wake up on the 11th and you haven't filled it in, it's not too late.
Are there penalties if you don't do it?
There are potential penalties. It is compulsory, but we use them sparingly.
Do you think that things like the Facebook data scandal and other sort of concerns around how big tech is using people's personal data is perhaps leading to that hesitancy around censuses?
So I don't know what's behind it, but we have very strong protections for people's information. One of the criticisms in the lead up to the 2016 census was how long we were keeping personal information, addresses and names. And one of the recommendations for us was to make clear well before the census how long we would be keeping names and addresses. And so we released more than a year ago, I think it was July of last year, we released privacy impact assessments on how long we should keep names and addresses, and we have committed to getting rid of names after 18 months and addresses after 3 years. So that's all on our website, and it was all kind of done in a kind of considered way well before the census.
And look, the end-to-end encryption, the sovereignty of the data, which we've emphasised a lot, and I think we've published a lot of information on it, is really designed to try and assuage those sorts of fears. And sovereignty of people's personal information and the protection of it, alongside the security aspects we've been talking about, has been crucially important to us.
How will your processes differ if there is a security event like last time? The communication strategy last time appeared a bit chaotic from the outside.
So the answer to that is that we have been doing exercises, scenario planning exercises, were something untoward happen, and we have a detailed kind of superstructure with decision makers and a decide room. We've done a lot of work to work out exactly what we would do were something like that to happen.
Does it include taking down the census in an extreme hack?
Well, we absolutely wouldn't want to have to do that, but our premier responsibility is safety.
I think it's fair to say we've planned for every eventuality and worst case scenarios and how we would be able to very quickly address those and communicate them.
The August 10's a sitting day. Are you going to do your census here or back home in Deakin?
It's a very good question, one that I probably should have thought about before I came here. I'm not sure. I'll speak to my wife and I would probably take advice from the Chief Statistician to make sure that I was a model citizen. So
Very happy to
perhaps
provide
we
that
need
advice,
to
Minister.
think about that.
Are there any sort of ideas that you have, or any sort of trends that you've seen in the data that you usually collect that you're hoping would be then reflected and given more detail in the census? I know there's been a lot of talk about during COVID people moving out of cities into regional areas. I think some of the data in the last couple of days that the ABS has revealed showed 30,000 or so people leaving Victoria over the last few periods. Are there any trends that you're thinking are going to be there that you're hoping to flesh out?
I mean, these trends can be measured just with enormous accuracy in the census. But it is a snapshot in time. So, I mean, I guess what the census is useful for is things you didn't think of, that you didn't know about from other sources. And so I think there'll be a lot of trends. The ones you're talking about will almost certainly be in the data, but there'll be other things, presumably as a consequence of COVID, that we haven't thought of that will appear in the data. So that's why we want to make sure that everyone fills it in.
What's your favourite answer from the census? Like, which question do you like to see?
The last census, before I had anything to do with the ABS, my wife and I had a discussion about how much unpaid work I did in the house. So let's just put it that way. So that's been a topic of conversation in our household for some time.
How are you failing on that?
Pardon?
How badly are you failing?
So this comes up, whenever I do anything. He's just practicing so that for the week before the census, he can put in a higher number.
But during your experience last night, were you bleary-eyed this morning, and what did you learn about counting, including the homeless?
No, I'm not bleary-eyed, though it is a bit of a wind tunnel up there, as I discovered. No, it's very uplifting. I mean, it ain't a lot of fun at the time, but Vinnie's collects a lot of money. So for Canberra, they're going to collect more than $1 million, and nationwide, it's obviously multiples of that, and it's. No, I don't feel bleary-eyed. I wouldn't want to do it too often. And of course, the difference between me and a homeless person is that I can go home and have a shower. And so, if you want to try and get a job as a homeless person, it isn't easy, and it doesn't hurt me to do this once a year and remind myself of it. So, I did.
David, do you want to add what would sort of the extra steps we're taking to reach out to homelessness providers and others to try and ensure we have integrity of that data?
So we have teams of people who work with local groups so that we actually go out. We don't expect them to fill the form in themselves. We'll go and do it and help them, and identify where homeless people tend to be and concentrate our efforts in those places.
Mr. Suga, just one other question, just within your responsibilities, but aside from the census, there's ongoing discussion about building supply shortages across the country, the pressure that this boom in construction, partly fueled by home builder, has created. I know you've already tweaked home builder, you've extended the construction deadlines to allow more people to get involved there. Is this something that you're going to have to continually look at because those crunches on supplies just don't seem to be easy?
Yeah, look, it's a very good question. What home builder has done has meant that we've got residential construction activity elevated in every jurisdiction. Typically what we've seen over the last couple of decades is you'll have periods where the East Coast is very busy but other parts of the country aren't, and so there's a natural equilibrium that's found. Because of home builder and low interest rates, we've seen residential construction activity just in every market around the country heightened. There are supply chain issues in virtually every manufacturing industry at the moment, and when you look at the United States, who, like many other governments, have gone to the lever of supporting the construction industry in the middle of a pandemic, we've seen global pressures on things like timber. So, timber that comes out of Eastern Europe now is at an elevated price, and a lot of what would be supplied to Australia is now going to North America. So the primary way we were able to try and deal with it, as you've just alluded to, is by extending the commencement time frame under the Home Builder program from 6 to 18 months to smooth that out. But there are still not only material pressures, but labour as well. So we're keeping a very close eye on it, particularly timber, and there are potentially some things that we can do to alleviate timber shortages that we're really closely looking at the moment. Some industry participants have told me they think we may have slightly turned a corner. It's certainly not business as usual. It's still hard. It's still, the timeframes of getting materials is still a bit slower than normal, but is perhaps getting a fraction better. So we're keeping a close eye on that. But timber is one area that we think there are some things that government can support industry with. We haven't made any final decisions, but we're looking at it really closely.
In what way?
In facilitating additional supply through sawmills, basically. There's been a bit of a perfect storm of issues. Obviously, heightened demand, global demand, and some areas that have exhausted their supply because of the bushfires. So we've got timber mills in some parts of the country running 3 shifts who couldn't do any more. Some other sawmills that are almost exhausting their supply of timber, and so they've got capacity to do it. If there's ways in which we can facilitate or help them get that supply, then they'll be able to continue feeding to the market.
Thanks, guys.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
See ya.